Etched into the obsidian pillars of the Galactic Council is a warning that serves as a survival mandate: do not hunt the humans. For a millennium, the galaxy complied. Alien species looked at our fragile skin, lack of natural armor, and blunt teeth, deciding to keep their distance, not because we were protected, but because the last race that dared to treat us as prey had been utterly erased. Eventually, however, someone forgot. Jacob Cole wiped a smear of thick black grease from his forehead with the back of a calloused hand. He stared down at the gutted manifold of his moisture evaporator, the rusted metal radiating the brutal midday heat of Ashwood. Ashwood was a rock, a quiet, dying, forgotten rock on the absolute fringe of the Perseus Arm. That was exactly why Cole lived here. He tossed the heavy iron wrench onto the dirt. It landed with a dull, heavy thud. Everything on Ashwood was heavy. The gravity was a solid 20% higher than Earth norm, which meant the atmosphere was thick, the crops grew low to the ground, and the people walked with a deliberate, grounded stoop. "You're stripping the threading coal," a voice called out. Cole didn't look up. He recognized the boots walking into his peripheral vision. Scuffed leather, steel-toed. Tommy Miller. The kid was 22 born on this dust ball and possessed an optimism that Cole found deeply exhausting. "The threading was stripped 10 years ago." "Tommy," Cole grunted, picking up a rag and wiping his hands. "Now it's just a matter of convincing the metal it still wants to hold together." Tommy leaned against the wooden frame of the barn. "Arthur is calling a town meeting down in the valley tonight. Says the comms relay has been down for 3 days. Thinks it's a solar flare." "It's always a solar flare," Cole said. He looked up at the sky. It wasn't blue. It was a bruised, sickly purple, heavy with the dust of the dry season. But right now, something was wrong with it. Cole's eyes narrowed. The cynic in him, the old soldier who had spent 20 years trying to forget the smell of burning atmosphere, felt a sudden sharp coldness in his gut. There were streaks in the purple. 5 of them. They weren't shooting stars. They were moving too deliberately, decelerating as they hit the thicker lower atmosphere. "Tommy," Cole said. His voice dropped an octave. The gravel in his throat wasn't from the dust anymore. "Get inside the barn." "What, Cole? It's just a meteor shower." The sound hit them a second later. It wasn't the screech of failing thrusters or the roar of a commercial shuttle. It was a rhythmic, pulsing boom, like a massive heart beating in the sky. Military-grade drop pods. "Barn, now." Cole grabbed the kid by the shoulder, his grip like a vice, and shoved him toward the darkened interior of the structure. Cole stayed in the doorway, pressing his back against the weathered timber. He watched the pods hit the ridge a mile out. The impacts shook the ground, rattling the loose tools on Cole's workbench. Plumes of red dust kicked up into the air. Then came the silence. A heavy, pregnant quiet. Even the wind seemed to stop blowing. Cole reached under his work shirt, his fingers brushing the smooth, raised scar tissue over his ribs. He had buried his past. He had buried his rifle. He just wanted to grow his miserable root vegetables and die quietly. A high-pitched whine pierced the air, followed by a sharp crack. Down in the valley where Tommy's family lived, a pillar of black smoke began to rise. Tommy saw it from the shadows of the barn. "My folks! Cole, my folks are down there!" The kid panicked. He broke cover, sprinting out of the barn and down the dirt road before Cole could stop him. "Tommy, wait!" It happened fast. A shimmer in the air like heat distortion over asphalt materialized at the edge of the property line. The cloaking field dropped. The creature was 8 feet tall, bipedal, and clad in sleek, iridescent armor that caught the dim sunlight. It held a long, barbed rifle in its lower set of arms, while its upper arms rested casually on a belt of strange metallic devices. A hunter. It didn't shoot Tommy. It didn't need to. It raised a hand, and a weighted glowing net shot from a wrist launcher. The net enveloped the kid, the energy cord snapping tight. Tommy screamed, thrashing on the ground as the cords burned into his clothes. The alien walked forward slowly. It wasn't in a hurry. It let out a sound, a clicking, rhythmic chattering that Cole instantly recognized. It was laughing. The creature reached down, grabbing Tommy by the hair, lifting the struggling human effortlessly. It tapped a device on its chest, and a metallic tether snapped around Tommy's neck. A trophy. Cole didn't yell. He didn't rush forward. He pressed himself deeper into the shadows of the barn, his breathing shallow, his heart rate dropping into a cold, methodical rhythm. He watched the alien drag the kid away toward the ridge. They were treating humans like game. They were taking them alive. Cole looked down at the dirt. He looked at his calloused hands. He closed his eyes, taking one last deep breath of the quiet life he was about to leave behind. When he opened them, the farmer was gone. The barn was dark-smelling of oil, old hay, and ozone. Cole stood completely still behind a massive grain thresher. He knew there were 3 of them. He had watched them separate from the main hunting party on the ridge, tracking Tommy's scent back to the farm. They were thorough. They wanted the rest of the herd. A heavy footstep crunched on the gravel outside the barn doors. The heat distortion rippled, and the first hunter stepped inside. Its helmet was narrow, featureless, except for a glowing blue horizontal visor. Cole studied the armor. It was advanced, likely woven with kinetic diffusers and energy shields, designed to absorb blaster fire, designed for peer-to-peer combat or hunting localized megafauna. But out here on the rim, humans didn't use blasters. Cole didn't have his gun yet. It was under the floorboards of the farmhouse, and the aliens were between him and the house. He looked down at the workbench beside him. He picked up the iron wrench. It was 3 feet long, solid cast iron, weighing close to 15 pounds. To an alien from a low-gravity world, it would be a cumbersome, useless hunk of metal. To a human born on Earth and raised on a heavy-G frontier world, it was a baseball bat. The hunter moved deeper into the barn. The blue visor scanned left to right, emitting a low hum. It clicked its mandibles beneath the helmet. Cole waited. He let the hunter walk past his hiding spot. He didn't strike from the front. He stepped out from the shadows, absolutely silent. He gripped the wrench with both hands, planted his boots into the dirt floor, twisted his hips, and swung. The alien's personal shield flared. The microgenerators were designed to detect high-velocity projectiles, plasma bolts, lasers, hypersonic rounds. They were not calibrated to register a slow, heavy blunt force object moving at the speed of a human swing. The shield ignored the wrench. The iron connected with the back of the hunter's helmet with a sickening crack. The sound was like a sledgehammer hitting a hollow block of ice. The alien didn't cry out. The sheer kinetic force of a heavy worlder's swing snapped the creature's cervical vertebrae instantly. It crumpled to the dirt floor in a heap of shattered armor and twitching limbs. Cole didn't pause. He dropped the wrench and grabbed the alien's dropped rifle. His thumb found the activation stud. He didn't know the make, but a trigger was a trigger. The second hunter entered the barn, alerted by the noise. It saw its fallen packmate and let out a high-pitched screech, raising its weapon. Cole fired first. The alien weapon kicked hard, a burst of superheated plasma illuminating the barn. The shot caught the second hunter in the chest, the plasma eating through the armor, dropping it backward into the dirt. The third hunter was smarter. It didn't charge in. It stayed outside, activating its active camouflage. Cole dropped the alien rifle. The energy cell was whining, likely biometric, locked, and about to overload. He sprinted toward the back of the barn, sliding through a gap in the wooden slats, just as the dropped rifle detonated, blowing the front doors off their hinges in a shower of splintered wood and blue fire. Cole hit the dirt outside, rolling into the tall, dry razor grass behind the farmhouse. He stayed low, crawling on his belly. The dust coated his sweat-soaked face. He could hear the heavy, frantic footsteps of the third hunter on the porch of the farmhouse. Cole reached the crawlspace under the kitchen. He shimmied beneath the floorboards. Above him, the heavy boots of the alien stalked across the wooden floor. Thud, thud, thud. Cole reached up, unlatching a hidden panel strapped to the joists. The metal lockbox was covered in a decade of dust. He keyed in the physical combination. Click. He lowered the box into the dirt and popped the lid. Inside rested a massive, ugly piece of machinery. An earth-patterned kinetic slug thrower. A pump-action trench gun chambered in 8-gauge depleted uranium slugs. It was archaic by galactic standards. It didn't shoot lasers. It shot solid blocks of heavy metal fast enough to punch through engine blocks. Beside it lay a heavy combat knife and a bandolier of shells. Cole racked the pump. Clack, clack. The mechanical sound was loud, heavy, and distinct. Above him, the footsteps stopped. The alien had heard it. Cole smiled in the darkness. It was a cold, humorless expression. He didn't try to sneak out. He aimed the barrel of the trench gun straight up at the floorboards, directly where the footsteps had stopped. He pulled the trigger. The roar of the gun was deafening in the confined space. The 8-gauge slug obliterated the floorboards, tearing through the wood and punching a hole the size of a fist straight up. A horrific shriek echoed from the kitchen above. Heavy armor crashed to the floor, followed by the wet sound of alien blood pooling through the splintered wood, dripping down onto Cole's shoulder. Cole wiped the alien blood off his cheek. He pushed himself out from under the crawlspace, stepping out into the blinding sunlight. He slung the bandolier over his chest and pumped the shotgun, ejecting the smoking brass casing into the dirt. They wanted to hunt. Cole cracked his neck. Season's open. The trek to the town of Red Creek took Cole 20 minutes. He didn't stick to the roads. He moved through the dry creek beds and the heavy brush, moving with a fluid, predatory grace that defied his age. Smoke hung heavy over the valley. The alien dropship's sleek, predatory wedges of dark metal hovered over the town square, casting long, oppressive shadows. Cole climbed the rocky escarpment overlooking the town. He dropped to his stomach, sliding up to the edge of the cliff to get a vantage point. Red Creek was a mess. The local law enforcement office was a burning pile of rubble. Down in the dusty central square, the hunters had gathered the townspeople. About 100 humans kneeling in the dirt, their hands bound with energy tethers. The aliens were pacing the perimeter. There were at least 40 of them. They weren't acting like an occupying army. They were acting like tourists. They pointed at the weeping humans chattering to one another, recording the events on wrist-mounted devices. In the center of the square stood their pack leader. He was larger than the rest, his armor adorned with the bones of previous prey from a dozen different worlds. He was currently examining Sheriff Jenna's dropped service revolver, turning it over in his claws and laughing at the primitive mechanism. "Don't shoot the leader yet," a voice whispered from the rocks to Cole's left. Cole didn't flinch. He kept his eyes on the square, slowly turning his head. Sheriff Jenna lay wedged between two boulders. Her left arm was heavily bandaged, with a torn piece of her uniform scorched black from a near-miss plasma burn. Her face was pale, smeared with ash, but her eyes were sharp. In her right hand, she gripped a lever-action hunting rifle. "You look like hell, Jenna," Cole muttered, crawling over to her. "They hit the station first," she said, her voice tight with pain. "Blew the front wall off, took my deputies. They're sorting them Cole. They're looking at teeth-checking muscle mass. They're deciding who makes the best trophies." "I know," Cole said. He checked her arm. The burn was deep, but cauterized. "Can you shoot with one hand?" "I can rest the barrel on the rock," Jenna said grimly. "I've got 10 rounds, but Cole, there's 40 of them down there. We open fire, they'll slaughter the civilians." "We aren't going to just open fire," Cole said, looking back down at the town. "Look at their armor. Look at how they move. They rely on their shields and their tech. They don't check their corners. They don't understand the concept of an ambush. They think they're standing in a pen with livestock. So what's the play? We teach them about wolves," Cole said. He pointed to the heavy industrial generators sitting behind the town's grain silos. "Those generators power the town's grid. The aliens are using our floodlights to illuminate the square for their little safari recording. If we blow the coolant tanks on the generators, the grid fails. The blast will be loud enough to disorient them." Jenna nodded slowly. "And when the lights go out, human eyes take a few minutes to adjust to the dark," Cole said. "But we know this town. We know where the ditches are, where the blind alleys are. Their visors are tuned for infrared and movement tracking. I've fought species with tech like that before. In an explosion, thermal bloom blinds them. For about 60 seconds, those visors will just show them static." 60 seconds isn't a lot of time, Cole. It is, if you know how to use it. Cole handed her 2 heavy 8-gauge slugs from his bandolier. "You hit the coolant tanks on the generators. When the lights go out, do not shoot into the square. Pick off the stragglers on the perimeter. Shoot shift position, shoot again. Make them think there's a battalion up here." "Where will you be?" Jenna asked. Cole racked the pump of the trench gun. "Down there, in the dark." Cole slipped away from the ridge, descending the rocky slope like a shadow. He reached the edge of the town, moving from the cover of a rusted tractor to the back wall of the general store. He was 50 yards from the square. He could hear the clicks and hisses of the alien language, the crying of the terrified colonists. He found a piece of heavy scrap iron laying by the store's loading dock. He picked it up. He waited. Up on the ridge, Jenna steadied her breathing. She rested the lever-action rifle against the stone, lining up the iron sights with the massive pressurized coolant tanks of the town generator. She squeezed the trigger. The rifle cracked. A split second later, the heavy round pierced the pressurized tank. The explosion was spectacular. A massive fireball of ignited coolant and ruptured machinery blew the side off the grain silo. The shockwave rattled the windows of every building in Red Creek. Instantly, the town's floodlights died. Plunged into sudden suffocating darkness, the alien hunters shrieked in surprise. Just as Cole predicted, the massive thermal bloom of the explosion blinded their tactical visors. The hunters began to fire their plasma weapons blindly into the air, lighting up the dust clouds in strobe light flashes of blue and purple. Panic. It was the first time they had felt it. Cole didn't panic. He moved. He slipped into the square, a ghost moving through the chaotic strobes of plasma fire. He came up behind a hunter, firing wildly into an alleyway. Cole didn't use the gun yet. Too loud, too revealing. He used the heavy piece of scrap iron. A brutal, crushing blow to the back of the knee. The alien's leg shattered under the kinetic force. As it dropped howling, Cole drove the combat knife up under the base of its helmet, severing its spinal cord. He pulled the blade free and caught the dying alien by the chest plate, using its armored body as a shield. The hunter next to it spun around its visor, slowly clearing from the static. It saw Cole holding its dead comrade. It raised its weapon. Cole shoved the dead weight forward, let go, and brought up the trench gun. Boom! At point-blank range, the depleted uranium slug tore through the hunter's kinetic shield, as if it wasn't there, blowing a hole clean through its chest plate. The sound of the shotgun echoed through the square, a monstrous booming roar that cut through the high-pitched whine of alien weaponry. It was a terrifying sound, a primitive mechanical roar of sheer violence. Cole pumped the gun. Clack, clack. Another flash of plasma from a panicked hunter illuminated Cole for a fraction of a second. He stood over the two dead aliens, his face smeared with ash and blood, the massive weapon leveled at the hip. Up on the ridge, Jenna's rifle cracked again. Another hunter on the perimeter dropped an exit wound blossoming from its helmet. The pack leader in the center of the square roared a terrifying sound of rage and sudden dawning terror. He realized they weren't dealing with panicking livestock. The prey was hunting back. The square of Red Creek descended into a very specific kind of hell. It was the hell of the unseen. For the alien hunters, the sudden darkness was absolute. Their visors, calibrated to filter the blinding glare of the town's floodlights, were caught completely off guard by the catastrophic thermal bloom of the generator explosion. To them, the world was a wash of blinding white static, followed by a terrifying, suffocating black. They possessed superior technology, neural-linked targeting matrices, and armor forged in orbital foundries. None of it mattered when they couldn't see the man standing 3 feet away. Cole moved through the dust and the dark like a native predator. He didn't run. Running made noise. He stalked. He found his next target near the rusted shell of an old water hauler. The hunter was spinning in circles, firing short, panicked bursts of plasma into the empty storefronts. The blue bolts illuminated the dust in harsh, stroboscopic flashes. Cole waited for the flash. He memorized the alien's position in that fraction of a second, then stepped into the void as the darkness returned. He came in low. He didn't use the trench gun. At this range, the muzzle flash would give away his position to the rest of the pack. He drew the heavy combat knife from his chest rig. 6 inches of high-carbon steel, dull black, to prevent reflection heavy enough to hack through bone. He drove his left shoulder hard into the back of the hunter's knees. The alien's legs buckled with a sharp bird-like squawk. As it fell backward, Cole brought his right arm around, burying the blade deep into the soft, unarmored joint beneath the creature's armpit. He twisted the handle, severing the brachial artery, and yanked it free. The hunter collapsed, thrashing in the dirt, its distress beacon emitting a weak, tragic chirp before shorting out in a pool of its own blood. Across the square, the pack leader was screaming. The language was a harsh, clicking, guttural mess, but the tone was universal. It was the sound of a commander realizing he had lost control of his unit. "Form up back to the ship! Back to the ship!" Cole couldn't understand the words, but he understood the intent. The remaining hunters, roughly 25 of them, were blindly staggering toward the sleek, dark wedge of their dropship, resting on the edge of the square. Its boarding ramp was lowered, a warm, inviting rectangle of amber light in the chaos. They were breaking. They were falling back to the safety of their armor and their shields. Cole couldn't let them reach the ship. If they got the ship's point defense cannons online, they would turn Red Creek into a crater. He stepped out from behind the water hauler, raised the trench gun to his shoulder, and racked the slide. The mechanical clack-clack was loud enough to cut through the crying of the terrified colonists. He aimed at the cluster of hunters rushing the ramp and pulled the trigger. The 8-gauge depleted uranium slug hit the hunter closest to the ramp. The kinetic transfer was horrific. The heavy metal punched through the alien's backplate, instantly killing it, and the sheer momentum hurled the dead body forward like a bowling ball, knocking 3 other hunters off the metal ramp and into the dirt. Up on the ridge, Jenna was doing her part. Her shoulder screamed in agony with every shot, the recoil of the lever-action rifle jarring her burned arm. But she didn't stop. She breathed in the dust, let it out slowly, and squeezed the trigger. Crack. The pilot of the dropship had made the fatal mistake of stepping out onto the ramp to lay down covering fire. Jenna's heavy hunting round took him right in the center of his narrow, featureless visor. The glass shattered. The pilot slumped backward, tumbling down the ramp and landing heavily in the dust. Down in the square, the pack leader saw his pilot die. The massive alien let out a roar of absolute fury, realizing the trap. They were pinned between a sniper on the high ground and a ghost with a hand cannon in the streets. The leader grabbed the nearest subordinate, physically throwing the smaller alien toward the general store as bait, and sprinted for the cover of the sheriff's ruined office. Cole watched the leader run. He pumped the shotgun, tracking the massive target, but a stray plasma bolt from a dying hunter slammed into the brick wall inches from Cole's head. The shower of superheated brick dust blinded him for a crucial second. He ducked back into the shadows, wiping his eyes with a gritty, calloused hand. The square was eerily quiet now, save for the moans of the dying aliens and the terrified, muffled sobs of the townspeople bound in the center. The remaining hunters had found cover behind the scattered debris of the town. The initial panic was over. Now it was a siege. Cole checked his bandolier. 8 shells left. His breathing was steady, his heart rate low. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by the cold, heavy reality of the butcher's bill. He leaned out, peering into the gloom. The amber light of the dropship ramp illuminated the dust. Between the ship, the ruined sheriff's office, and the general store, there were at least 15 hostiles left. Armed, cornered, and finally realizing they were fighting for their lives. A tinny amplified voice echoed from the sheriff's rubble. The pack leader was using a universal translator. Human, the voice ground out heavy with synthetic distortion. You fight with the desperation of an animal, but you are flesh. We are steel. Cole spat a glob of dust and blood into the dirt. He didn't answer. You don't talk to the meat. You just process it. The sky in the east began to bruise with the first hints of dawn. The sickly purple of Ashwood's atmosphere bled into a pale, anemic orange. It offered just enough light to cast long, horrific shadows across the center of Red Creek. The townspeople were huddled together in the dirt, a mass of trembling limbs and wide, terrified eyes. Tommy was among them, his face pressed into the dirt, the energy tether tight around his neck. From the wreckage of the sheriff's station, the pack leader stepped out. The dawn light caught his armor. It was deeply gouged and scarred, covered in the ash of the town. He wasn't holding his rifle anymore. In his upper right hand, he held a sleek curved blade of shimmering hard light. In his left, he dragged Arthur, the town's elderly mechanic. Arthur's face was bloodied, his overalls torn. The pack leader pressed the hard light blade against the old man's throat. "Show yourself!" The leader's translated voice boomed across the silent square. "Or I start removing pieces of your elder." Cole was crouched behind the axle of a rusted flatbed truck 50 feet away. He looked at Arthur. The old man had fixed Cole's evaporators for a decade. He had snuck Cole bottles of decent bourbon when the crop yields were low. Arthur caught Cole's eye in the shadows. The old man gave a slow, deliberate shake of his head. "Don't do it," Cole sighed, a long, weary sound that carried the weight of 20 years of hiding. He stood up. He didn't raise his hands. He just stepped out from behind the truck, the trench gun resting casually against his right leg. The pack leader's helmet snapped toward him. The remaining alien hunters emerged from their cover, raising their plasma rifles, their targeting lasers painting Cole's chest in a dozen glowing red dots. "Stop!" the leader barked at his men. The alien stared at Cole, the blue visor evaluating the human. "You are the one making the noise. You wear no armor. You carry a kinetic relic. Yet you have butchered 20 of my pride." "You made a mistake," Cole said. His voice was gravel flat and devoid of any theatrical emotion. "You came down here looking for a safari. You are unclassified on the Galactic Index." The leader sneered, pressing the blade closer to Arthur's neck. "You have no orbital defenses, no standing military. You are a prey species hiding on a dead rock." "We're not unclassified," Cole said, taking a slow step forward. "We're redacted," the leader clicked his mandibles. "Semantics of the weak. 1,000 years ago, we went out into the stars." Cole continued his boots, crunching on the broken glass of the street. "We met the council. We tried to play nice. We tried to trade. But species like yours looked at our biology. You saw soft skin and blunt teeth, and you thought livestock." Cole stopped 20 feet from the leader. He looked directly at the glowing blue visor. "A syndicate out of the Orion Spur took 3 of our colony ships." Cole said, the temperature of his voice dropping to absolute 0. 100,000 humans. They put them in pens. They hunted them for sport, just like you're doing. The alien leader scoffed a clicking wet sound. "A tragedy of the weak." "No," Cole said. "It was the catalyst. We didn't send diplomats to ask for them back. We sent the shock divisions. I was in the 104th orbital drop. We didn't fight their military. We dropped onto their homeworld and we systematically dismantled their entire civilization. We burned their cities. We salted their oceans. We didn't stop until their species was a footnote in a history book." The red lasers on Cole's chest wavered slightly. The alien hunters were listening to the translator. "The Galactic Council didn't write Article 9 to protect us," Cole said, shifting his grip on the trench gun. "They wrote it to protect you." "A myth," the leader hissed, but the hard light blade trembled. "A story you tell to hide your fear. Let the old man go. Cole said softly. You let him go, and I'll let you fight me. 1-on-1. You win, you take the herd. I win, you leave your ship and walk into the desert. The leader looked at Cole. He looked at the heavy, archaic weapon. He looked at his own shimmering armor, his energy shields, his hard light blade. The arrogance of a superior species flared in his chest. A primitive throwing kinetic rocks was one thing. Melee combat against a heavy worlder was another. He didn't know about human bone density. He didn't know about adrenaline. The leader shoved Arthur away. The old man scrambled into the dirt, coughing. I will mount your skull on my command console, the leader snarled. He threw his plasma rifle to the ground and activated his personal shield. A shimmering blue dome enveloped him. He raised his hard light blade and let out a deafening roar, charging across the 20 feet of dirt with terrifying speed. Cole didn't move. He didn't raise the shotgun. The alien closed the distance in 2 seconds, bringing the burning blade down in a vicious, sweeping arc aimed at Cole's collarbone. Cole moved. He didn't dodge backward. That was how you died against superior reach. He stepped inside the guard. He dropped his shoulder, taking the grazing blow of the hard light blade across his left bicep. The smell of searing meat and ozone filled the air as the blade cauterized the deep gash it created. Cole grunted, his teeth grinding together, but he didn't falter. He used the momentum of his forward step, bringing the heavy steel-reinforced stock of the 8-gauge trench gun up in a brutal rising uppercut. The heavy wood and steel bypassed the kinetic shield entirely, just like the wrench had. The stock connected with the underside of the leader's helmet with the force of a wrecking ball. The alien's head snapped back with a sickening crack. The hard light blade extinguished as the leader dropped it, his hands flying up to his shattered helmet. Before the alien could recover, Cole dropped the shotgun. He grabbed the leader by the armored chest plate with his good right hand, his fingers finding the gaps in the plating. He planted his heavy work boots into the dirt and twisted his entire body, leveraging the heavy G muscle mass developed from 20 years of farming dead soil. He threw the 8-foot alien over his hip. The leader slammed into the dirt with a ground-shaking thud. The breath left his lungs in a wheezing gasp. Cole didn't give him a second to breathe. He straddled the massive chest, drew his combat knife, and drove it with all his weight straight down into the narrow, featureless visor. The glass shattered. The blade sank to the hilt. The alien thrashed violently for exactly 3 seconds, then went completely limp. Cole pulled the knife out, breathing heavily, blood dripping from his left arm onto the alien's broken armor. He stood up slowly, picking up his trench gun. He turned to face the remaining alien hunters. There were 14 of them left. They were staring at the dead body of their invincible pack leader, slain in hand-to-hand combat by a bleeding, unarmored farmer. Cole racked the shotgun. The aliens dropped their weapons. They fell to their knees. They didn't speak. They just offered their wrists, waiting for the tethers. They had learned the law. The morning sun finally crested the horizon, painting Red Creek in harsh, unforgiving light. The town looked like a slaughterhouse. Alien bodies lay scattered in the dust, their iridescent armor dulling under the ashwood sun. The remaining 14 hunters were bound back to back in the center of the square, tied up with their own energy tethers. They sat in absolute silence, heads bowed. Cole sat on the tailgate of a rusted pickup truck, his left sleeve torn off. Bill, the town doctor, was a nervous man who usually dealt with tractor accidents and heat stroke. He was currently wrapping Cole's bicep in a thick layer of sterile gauze, his hands shaking violently. "It's a clean burn, Cole," Bill stammered, tying off the bandage. "Cauterized instantly, but you're going to lose a lot of mobility in that arm for a few weeks. The muscle tissue is cooked." "It's fine, Bill. Thanks," Cole muttered, flexing his fingers. They were stiff, radiating a dull, throbbing ache that settled deep into his bones. Jenna walked over. Her face was pale, smeared with dirt and gunpowder residue. Her left arm was in a makeshift sling, but she held a captured plasma rifle in her good hand. She looked at the bound aliens, then at the dead. "We lost 6 people," Jenna said softly. Her voice carried the exhaustion of a woman who had seen too much in one night. 3 of my deputies, the Miller boy's dad, 2 others from the ridge. The rest are shaken, but alive." Cole closed his eyes for a moment. He thought of Tommy's father, a good man who complained too much about the rain. "Tell Tommy I'm sorry. He knows you saved him, Cole. He knows you saved all of them." Jenna leaned against the truck. "But this isn't over, is it?" Cole opened his eyes and looked up. The bruised purple sky was clear, but he knew what was hiding behind the thin veil of the atmosphere. "No," Cole said. "It's not." He pushed himself off the tailgate and walked toward the center of the square, where the alien dropship rested. The sleek, dark metal was untouched by the battle. Arthur was standing at the base of the ramp, running a scarred hand over the hull plating. "Arthur," Cole called out. "You good?" The old mechanic turned, spitting a wad of chewing tobacco into the dust. "Been better, Jacob. My neck hurts and I need a drink, but I'm breathing." He patted the hull of the ship. "This is a beautiful piece of machinery. Anti-grav drives, dark matter thrusters. It's light years ahead of anything we've got in the sheds." "Can you fly it?" Cole asked. Arthur raised an eyebrow. "Fly it? I don't even know how to open the door, Cole. The console inside is all holographic squiggles. It's biometrically locked near as I can tell." Cole walked up the ramp, stepping over the body of the dead pilot. The interior of the ship was pristine, smelling of sterile air and ozone. The cockpit was wide, featuring 4 seats and a massive panoramic viewport. The primary console was glowing a soft, angry red. Cole stepped up to the console. He reached out with his right hand and wiped a smear of the dead pilot's blue blood onto the primary interface pad. The console chirped. The red light shifted to a calm, welcoming blue. The holographic squiggles reorganized themselves into a complex array of flight telemetry weapon systems and orbital maps. Arthur walked up behind him, staring in disbelief. "How did you—" "The biometric locks are tied to species DNA, not individual profiles." Cole set his eyes, scanning the holographic displays. "They don't expect their ships to be stolen by the prey. It's an oversight." "Cole," Jenna said, stepping into the cockpit. "What are you doing? We survived. We have them contained. We wait for the Colonial Authority to respond to our distress beacon." "The Colonial Authority is 3 weeks out, Jenna." Cole set his fingers flying across the holographic controls with practiced, terrifying speed. "Look at the radar." He tapped a sequence, and a massive 3-dimensional hologram projected into the center of the cockpit. It showed Ashwood. And sitting in high orbit, directly above Red Creek, was a massive jagged blip. "That's their mothership," Cole said grimly. "A Harvester-class cruiser. It's got a crew of at least 500. Right now, it's pinging this dropship asking for a status report on the hunt. In about 10 minutes, when they don't get the right response codes, they aren't going to send another hunting party." Jenna swallowed hard. What will they do? They'll conclude the hunting ground is contaminated. Cole said, his voice completely devoid of emotion. They will move into low orbit and use their plasma bombardment cannons to turn this entire valley into a glass parking lot. They'll erase the evidence. Silence fell over the cockpit. The only sound was the low, steady hum of the dropship's anti-grav drives idling in standby. "So we evacuate," Arthur said, his voice trembling slightly. "We get everyone into the caves up in the hills. Ground-penetrating radar will find the caves," Cole said. "And plasma burns hot enough to melt rock. There's no hiding from an orbital strike, Arthur. You either stop the ship or you die." Jenna looked at Cole. She looked at his scarred face, the cold, dead look in his eyes. She finally saw the soldier he had tried so desperately to bury. "You're going up there," she whispered. Cole didn't look away from the console. He was busy bypassing the flight restrictors and arming the ship's payload. "They broke the law, Jenna. They came here to hunt, but they don't understand the rules of the game they started." He turned around, his eyes locking onto hers. "You don't survive a predator by hiding. You survive a predator by proving you are the bigger monster." Cole grabbed the dead pilot's helmet from the floor. He wiped the blood from the visor and set it on the console. "Arthur, get the townspeople out of the square. Get them as far away from the blast radius as you can." Cole sat down in the pilot's seat. The leather groaned under his weight. "Jenna, you're in charge now. If I don't come back, you keep them safe until the authority arrives." "Cole, you can't take a cruiser by yourself," Jenna argued, stepping forward. "It's suicide." "I'm not taking it," Cole said, his hands gripping the yoke. The engines began to whine, a high-pitched scream of building power. "I'm breaking it." He hit the thruster release. The dropship lurched the inertial dampeners, struggling to compensate for the sudden surge of power. The ship shot out of the town square, leaving a cloud of red dust in its wake, and angled its nose straight up into the bruised purple sky. Cole felt the heavy gravity of Ashwood pushing against his chest, pressing him into the seat. He ignored the pain in his arm. He ignored the fear. He focused on the massive blip on the radar growing larger with every passing second. The hunt was over. The war had begun. The atmosphere of Ashwood didn't fade quietly. It scraped against the hull of the stolen dropship, a high-pitched metallic shriek that vibrated in Jacob Cole's molars. He kept his right hand locked on the yoke, pushing the throttle past the red line. His left arm hung uselessly at his side, the field dressing already soaked through with fresh blood. The G-force was a physical weight on his chest, pressing the air out of his lungs. The bruised purple sky outside the viewport thinned into a pale violet, then snapped into the harsh absolute black of the void. Cole cut the main thrusters. The sudden weightlessness hit him like a punch to the gut, but the ship's artificial gravity instantly kicked in, dropping him hard back into the pilot's seat. He looked at the radar. The Harvester-class cruiser hung in high orbit, a massive jagged slab of obsidian metal. It didn't look like a vessel of exploration or diplomacy. It looked like a flying slaughterhouse. It was a brutalist wedge of overlapping armor plates, bristling with sensory arrays and point defense cannons. It was 3 miles long, casting a long, cold shadow over the curvature of the planet below. The console pinged. A rapid, rhythmic flashing of yellow text in an alien script. They were hailing him. Cole didn't touch the comms. He didn't know the language, and he didn't have the codes. He let the stolen dropship's automated transponder do the talking. The dead pilot's biometric signature was still registered in the ship's local mainframe. The transponder spat out a steady encrypted handshake. Hunting Party 04, returning to base. For 10 agonizing seconds, the cruiser's point defense cannons tracked him. Massive twin-barreled plasma batteries swiveled on their heavy mounts, locking onto the tiny dropship. If the transponder handshake failed, Cole would be vaporized before he could even blink. The yellow text on the console turned a soft, welcoming green. The cannons powered down, swiveling back to their neutral positions. The massive, heavily armored doors of the cruiser's primary ventral hangar bay began to grind open, spilling a rectangle of harsh white light into the vacuum of space. Cole exhaled. He guided the dropship into the automated docking lane. The cruiser's tractor beams grabbed the small vessel, pulling it in with a sickening magnetic lurch. The hangar bay was cavernous, smelling of ozone-burnt promethium fuel and the heavy metallic tang of alien blood. Row upon row of dropships sat in their charging cradles. But it was the back half of the hangar that made Cole's blood run cold. Suspended from massive mechanized tracks on the ceiling were hundreds of heavy iron cages. Most were empty, some were not. He saw the slumped forms of local fauna from a dozen different rim worlds. And in one row, tucked away near the processing vents, he saw the tattered fabric of a colonial agricultural uniform. They weren't just hunting, they were harvesting. The dropship touched down with a heavy metallic clang. The docking clamps locked into place. Cole stood up. He unbuckled the bandolier of 8-gauge shells and strapped it tight across his chest. He picked up the heavy trench gun, checking the chamber. 5 slugs left. In the side pocket of his canvas cargo pants, he carried 3 alien plasma grenades he had stripped off the dead in the town square. Outside the dropship, the boarding ramp lowered with a hiss of hydraulics. 2 alien deckhands stood at the base of the ramp. They were a different caste than the hunters shorter unarmored, wearing heavy industrial aprons and carrying diagnostic data pads. They chattered back and forth in their clicking tongue, waiting for the victorious hunters to disembark with their trophies. Cole didn't walk down the ramp. He stayed in the shadows of the airlock. The deckhands stopped talking. One of them tapped his datapad, confused by the lack of movement. He took a step up the ramp, peering into the gloom of the ship. Cole reached out with his good hand, grabbed the alien by the front of its heavy apron, and jerked it violently inside. Before the creature could make a sound, Cole drove his combat knife up through the soft tissue beneath its jaw, piercing the brain stem. He dropped the body quietly to the deck. The second deckhand took a step back, its eyes widening as it saw the human step out of the shadows. It opened its mandibles to scream. Cole threw the heavy combat knife. The blade spun end over end, sinking deep into the alien's throat. It collapsed backwards, its scream turning into a wet, gurgling wheeze. Cole walked down the ramp, his boots completely silent on the metal deck. He pulled his knife from the dead alien's throat and wiped it clean on the creature's apron. He looked up at the towering architecture of the hangar. He didn't know the layout of a harvester cruiser, but he knew the basic anatomy of spacecraft. To move 3 miles of armored hull, you needed a massive power source. You needed a heart, and a heart generated heat. Cole looked at the massive ventilation shafts running along the upper bulkheads. They were huge, built to scrub the air for a crew of 8-foot-tall behemoths. He slung the trench gun over his back. Using a stack of heavy cargo crates, he climbed up to the nearest access grate. The metal was cold, vibrating with the low, steady thrum of the ship's engines. He kicked the latch hard with the heel of his boot. The lock snapped. He hauled himself into the duct, the heavy gravity of the cruiser pulling at his burned arm. He didn't have time to bleed. He started crawling toward the heat. The ventilation shafts were a labyrinth of dark, narrow metal. The air here was thick with the smell of coolant and machine oil. Cole crawled for 20 minutes, his knees bruising against the ribbed flooring, his left arm throbbing with a dull, rhythmic agony. He moved purely on instinct, following the ambient temperature. The warmer the metal, the closer he was to the engineering deck. Below him, through the slotted floor grates, he saw the crew. Hunters in their sleek armor, technicians in their overalls, officers draped in ceremonial pelts. They walked the wide, sterile corridors with the slow, arrogant gait of a species that had never been challenged. They thought they were gods. Cole reached a junction box where the duct widened. The heat here was oppressive, a dry, static, heavy warmth that made his hair stand on end. He peered through a heavy iron grate. He had found it. The engineering bay was a massive cylindrical chamber stretching hundreds of feet up and down. In the center, suspended by a web of heavy magnetic coils, hung the dark matter reactor. It was a sphere of roiling, violent violet energy contained within a lattice of transparent, supercooled hyperglass. Massive pipes, thick as redwood trees, pumped liquid nitrogen into the core to keep the reaction from consuming the ship. There were 12 guards in the room, heavy infantry. Their armor was thicker than the hunters on the ground, equipped with heavy plasma repeaters and shoulder-mounted tracking modules. Cole couldn't sneak past them. He didn't want to. He kicked the grate out. It fell 40 feet, clanging loudly against a catwalk below. The guards snapped their weapons upward, the tracking lasers painting the empty duct. Cole didn't jump down. He pulled one of the stolen plasma grenades from his pocket. He twisted the activation dial, waited 2 seconds for the core to whine, and dropped it straight down into the center of the room. The grenade detonated mid-air. It wasn't a fragmentation explosive. It was a concussion wave of superheated plasma. 3 of the guards were caught in the blast radius. Their shields flared white and died the sheer thermal shock, melting their armor to their skin. They fell to the grated floor, shrieking. Cole dropped from the duct landing heavy on the upper catwalk. The impact sent a shock wave of pain up his burned arm, but he pushed it down into a dark, quiet place in his mind. He unslung the trench gun. The heavy infantry laid down suppressive fire. Bolts of blue plasma tore through the catwalk, melting the steel railing inches from Cole's face. He stayed low, moving with a brutal, practiced efficiency. This was CQB, close quarters battle. This was where the 104th orbital drop earned their pay. He popped up over a structural support beam. He didn't aim for center mass. Their heavy armor would absorb it. He aimed for the joints. Boom. The roar of the 8-gauge in the enclosed metallic chamber was deafening. The sound waves alone shattered the glass displays on the nearby diagnostic consoles. The depleted uranium slug caught a guard in the knee joint. The leg simply ceased to exist, amputated by pure kinetic force. The heavy infantrymen toppled over the edge of the catwalk, falling into the depths of the engineering bay. Cole pumped the gun. Clack, clack. He fired again. The recoil bruised his shoulder, but another guard dropped his shoulder joint, completely obliterated. The remaining guards realized their shields were useless against the primitive slug thrower. They broke formation, scrambling for hard cover behind the coolant pipes. Cole didn't give them the chance to regroup. He rushed down the metal stairs, his boots clanging like a death knell. He grabbed a heavy wrench from a nearby tool rack, alien design, but heavy iron was heavy iron. A guard stepped out from behind a pipe, raising his plasma repeater. Cole threw the wrench. It struck the guard squarely in the visor, cracking the glass and staggering the alien backward. Cole closed the distance, grabbed the barrel of the alien's weapon, shoved it toward the ceiling, and drove his combat knife up under the chin piece of the helmet. Blood sprayed across the pristine hyperglass of the reactor. The alarm finally sounded, a wailing, discordant siren that bathed the room in pulsing red light. 5 guards left. They were terrified. They were backing away, firing wildly, their discipline breaking against the relentless, mechanical brutality of the human. Cole raised the trench gun. Boom! Another guard fell. 4 left. Click. The shotgun was empty. Cole didn't hesitate. He dropped the trench gun and scooped up the heavy plasma repeater from the dead guard at his feet. The weapon was massive, meant to be fired from the hip by an 8-foot creature. Cole braced the stock against his ribs, gritted his teeth against the pain in his burned arm, and squeezed the trigger. A torrent of superheated blue fire washed over the remaining guards. Their shields flickered, overloaded, and popped. The plasma chewed through the heavy armor, turning the metal white hot. They fell screaming, their armor cooking them alive. The room fell silent, save for the wailing siren and the deep throbbing hum of the dark matter reactor. Cole dropped the alien weapon. His hands were shaking. The adrenaline was burning out, leaving him hollow and aching. He walked over to the primary control terminal. The interface was completely alien, a matrix of glowing geometric shapes. He didn't know how to initiate a self-destruct sequence, but he knew how plumbing worked. He looked at the massive pipes feeding liquid nitrogen into the reactor core. They were governed by heavy mechanized pressure valves. Cole picked up his trench gun. He loaded his last 3 shells into the tube. He walked up to the primary coolant valve, a massive joint of reinforced steel holding back thousands of gallons of sub-zero liquid. He pressed the barrel of the shotgun directly against the motorized locking mechanism. "Article 9, Cole whispered. He pulled the trigger. The slug shattered the locking mechanism. High-pressure liquid nitrogen exploded outward in a blinding, freezing geyser. The metal pipe shrieked as the pressure differential tore it completely off its mountings. Cole staggered back, the freezing mist covering his clothes in a layer of frost. The dark matter reactor immediately reacted to the loss of coolant. The deep violet energy flared, turning an angry, unstable crimson. The deep hum pitched upward into a terrifying, teeth-rattling whine. The magnetic containment coils began to spark and groan under the sudden surge of thermal expansion. The ship's automated AI began broadcasting over the intercom. The voice was calm female and spoke in the clicking alien tongue. Cole didn't need a translator. He knew a core breach warning when he heard one. He had about 5 minutes before the ship turned into a miniature sun. The cruiser was dying. The artificial gravity flickered, causing Cole to stumble as his weight rapidly shifted between 200 pounds and nothing. The heavy blast doors at the end of the engineering bay began to slide shut, part of the ship's automated quarantine protocols. Cole sprinted. He slid under the descending metal door just as it slammed into the deck, locking the doomed reactor behind him. He was in the main corridor. The red emergency lights strobed wildly. Alien crew members were running in every direction, panicking. They didn't even look at Cole. The hierarchy of the ship had completely broken down. The hunters had become the hunted, and now they were all just meat, on a sinking ship. Cole needed a way off. The drop ships in the main hangar would be locked down or mobbed by panicked crew. He needed something automated, something built for emergencies. He remembered his time in the 104th. Orbital drop pods. Every military vessel had them, usually located near the crew quarters or the ventral airlocks. He followed the flow of the panicked crew shoving past terrified technicians. He reached a wide junction that ended in a row of heavy cylindrical airlocks. Escape pods. Most of them were already launching, shooting out of the ship's hull like silver bullets. There was one pod left, its door standing open. An alien officer wearing the ceremonial pelts of a ship commander was frantically punching codes into the console, trying to initiate the launch sequence. Cole walked up behind him. The commander turned his blue visor, locking onto the human. He drew a heavy plasma pistol from his hip. Cole didn't slow down. He didn't have any ammo left for the shotgun. He lunged forward, ignoring the searing heat of a plasma bolt that grazed his ribcage. He slammed his body weight into the commander, driving the alien backward into the tight confines of the escape pod. The commander roared, grappling with Cole. The alien was massive, incredibly strong, but it was fighting out of panic. Cole was fighting out of muscle memory. Cole brought his knee up, burying it into the alien's groin. As the commander doubled over, Cole drew his combat knife and drove it deep into the gap between the helmet and the chest plate, severing the collarbone and puncturing the lung. The commander collapsed to the floor of the pod, choking on his own blue blood. Cole stood over him, breathing heavily. He looked down at the dying alien. "Tell your gods," Cole rasped, kicking the alien's plasma pistol out of the pod and into the corridor. "We aren't prey." He grabbed the dying commander by the collar and hauled his heavy body out of the pod, dumping him onto the metal deck of the dying cruiser. Cole hit the emergency launch button on the pod's bulkhead. The heavy door slammed shut, sealing him in darkness. The explosive bolts fired. The pod shot out of the cruiser's launch tube, hurtling into the cold vacuum of space. Cole strapped himself into the crash seat. Through the small, reinforced viewport, he watched the Harvester cruiser. The ship was shuddering violently, the outer hull plates buckling under the immense internal pressure of the failing dark matter core. Veins of crimson light cracked across the obsidian armor. Then it shattered. There was no sound in the vacuum, just a blinding, pure white flash of light that erased the stars. The 3-mile-long cruiser was atomized in a fraction of a second, expanding into a massive, roiling cloud of superheated plasma and shattered debris. The shockwave hit Cole's pod a second later. The small vessel spun wildly, tumbling through the debris field. The automated thrusters fired, struggling to stabilize the descent as the pod caught the upper atmosphere of Ashwood. Heat friction painted the viewport in streaks of orange fire. The G-force returned, crushing Cole into the seat. He closed his eyes, the exhaustion finally overtaking him. The job was done. Down on the surface of Ashwood, in the hills above the ruined town of Red Creek, the colonists watched the sky. Jenna stood beside Arthur, her good arm resting on the old mechanic's shoulder. The morning sky was clear, the pale sun rising over the ridges. Suddenly, a second sun ignited in the heavens. A brilliant silent flash of light turned the shadows sharp and dark. The colonists gasped, shielding their eyes. For a few long seconds, the sky burned with a beautiful, terrifying white fire. Then the light faded, leaving behind a slowly expanding cloud of glittering debris in the upper atmosphere. He did it, Arthur whispered, taking off his oil-stained cap. The crazy son of a bitch actually did it. Jenna didn't say anything. She just watched a single fiery streak separate from the debris cloud, a shooting star burning hot and fast, descending toward the western desert. 3 hours later, they found him. The escape pod had crashed hard in the salt flats, carving a deep trench in the white earth. The hatch was blown open. Jenna drove the rusted medical transport up to the crater. She and Bill the doctor scrambled down the loose dirt. Cole was sitting against the scorched hull of the pod. His clothes were charred, his left arm wrapped in bloody gauze, his face covered in a thick layer of soot and dried sweat. He was smoking a battered, half-crushed cigar he had pulled from an inner pocket. The heavy trench gun lay across his lap. He looked up as Jenna approached. He took a slow drag of the cigar and blew a thin stream of gray smoke into the desert air. Cole. Jenna breathed, dropping to her knees beside him. "You're alive." "Unfortunately," Cole grunted, wincing as Bill started prodding his ribs. "Tell Arthur he owes me a bottle of bourbon, the good stuff, not that engine degreaser he usually drinks." Jenna let out a wet, genuine laugh, wiping a tear from her soot-stained cheek. She looked up at the sky, where the faint glittering dust of the alien cruiser still hung in the atmosphere. "They won't come back, will they?" she asked quietly. Cole looked at his scarred hands. He thought of the empty cages in the hangar. He thought of the law that had kept the galaxy safe and the arrogance that had broken it. "No," Cole said, his voice hard and cold. "They won't come back, but someone else will." He picked up the trench gun, resting the heavy barrel on his shoulder. "And when they do, we'll be waiting. That is the end of the story. The hunters came to Ashwood expecting a safari, but they found the 104th orbital drop waiting in the dirt. Jacob Cole proved that human resilience isn't just a myth. It's a terrifying kinetic reality that the galaxy is about to remember. If you loved this deep dive into HFY lore, smash that like button and subscribe to the channel so you never miss an upload. We have plenty more stories of humanity showing the cosmos exactly why they should be feared. Leave a comment below. What weapon would you want by your side during an alien invasion? See you in the next one.